Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Nick Thompson. You may know me from Netflix Love is Blind, but on this podcast, we sit down with guests from all walks of life to hear their story, remove stigmas, and uncover what makes them tick. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Conversations with Nick Thompson. I'm your host, Nick Thompson. 2023 for me is all about connecting better with myself, connecting better with others, building connections among people in my network that I think would be of value to one another. One of the most important things that I've learned in my entire life, really, but both personally, professionally, is that the connections that we have start with ourselves. And when you have a good connection with yourself, you can show up in the world as your authentic self and attract the right people, connect with others, build relationships. That can be at work, that can be in your personal life, that can be with your family, that can be with your friends. The work starts with you, because if you don't know who you are, you don't know who your core values are, you don't know what you're passionate about, you don't have a sense of your true authentic self, you have the potential to go out and build the wrong kind of connections, damage the ones that should be healthy, have distant relationships, or none at all with family, which is just awful when you think about it. And additionally with friends, like you may have the wrong kind of friends, or you may not be having the types of friends that you want, or the experiences that you want, or the conversations that you want. That's what brought me to today's guest. Today's guest is Susan McPherson. She is a number of wonderful things, and she's truly just an exceptional human being. But she is the author of The Lost Art of Connecting, which came out in 2021. What's interesting is this book is built on an entire life and career of so many different experiences, we'll just say, because we'll have Susan walk us through those. But her book came out after the pandemic, but she actually began writing it before the pandemic. So what's interesting there is all of this time that Susan had to spend remotely helped her develop ways of connecting with people, even if it starts digitally now, but building that human connection in real life. And I think now that we're pretty much coming out of the pandemic and we're going back to work in some instances, or at least social events for work, or occasional get-togethers or offsites, we're back to maybe engaging with potential partners out in the wild, in the real world. We're back to family gatherings around holidays. We're back to socializing with our friends. And we're put in these situations now where we're back in a scenario that we've had changed behaviors over the last few years. So I thought it would be really interesting, as I'm focused on my connections with myself and with others, to make sure that I'm surrounding myself with the right people for me, and that I'm with the right people for them. And so I thought it would be great to have Susan on today to talk about her experience with the book, but also her life story. So Susan considers herself a serial connector, which I think is, a goal of mine. So in a sense, I'm interested to learn a lot of her tactics and her strategies and the way that she approaches building human connections. So I think we're gonna dive into all of that. And as you listen to this, think to yourself, who am I as a person? Like, what's my relationship, or what's my connection with myself? Like, am I giving myself the tools that I need to feel good, to be healthy, to show up at work and be effective, and show up as myself when I'm with family and friends? And think about what you need to work on. And maybe we'll get some pointers here. And then how you want to show up in the world. Take that perspective as you listen to this, because I think there's going to be some opportunities to learn and maybe apply some of these into your everyday life. And I know that I'm looking forward to doing the same. So thank you. And I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's get to it. Today's guest, we have Susan McPherson on today. She is the author of The Lost Art of Connecting, to Gather, Ask, Do, the Gather, Ask, Do method for building meaningful relationships. She's also a CEO and founder of McPherson Strategies, which is a communications company helping corporations get better at communication. And she also serves as the board member for a number of not-for-profits, while also investing in women entrepreneurs. So Thank you for coming on today, Susan. I know I didn't get everything, but I tried to get what I thought was the best.
Thank you, Nick. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And quite frankly, the book title is way too long. We can just say connecting at this point.
So I had another long title before, and I did just say that. And then every time that author spoke about it, said the full name. So then I was like, I better just say the full name moving forward. So
1,000%.
I want to start off with some small talk questions so we can get to know you a little bit better. Sure. So first and foremost, I'd imagine you've traveled a lot given your career and your work. So where's your favorite place that you've traveled?
Oh my goodness. I have been many, 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 many places. And that's partially because I'm so damn old. But I have to say Antarctica.
Oh.
I thank the good whatever. I'm not religious, but I'll just say thank good Lord. I got to go in January of 2020. Obviously a few months before the whole world shut down. And it was the most magical, inspirational, rewarding trip. The just enormity of the continent is mind-blowing. Wow. You only get to see a little snippet of it. But I will also say this past September, I went to Greenland on a climate change trip with 24 of the most brilliant and accomplished women. And for 6 days, we got to understand what was happening to the glaciers and the impact climate was having on Greenland and inextricably the rest of the world. So I have to say both Antarctica and Greenland were exceptionally magical for all sorts of reasons.
That sounds like an awesome trip. And don't you have to have like special permission or something to even go to Antarctica? I would imagine you were there with...
I went with Lindblad Nat Geo. And the ship that I joined had about 100 people. Certain cruise ships that go through the various fjords and islands which surround Antarctica are not, they have more than 200 people, you're not allowed to disembark. But every day we were able to disembark and visit various islands and be able to get up close and personal, obviously within safe distances because you want to protect the wildlife, to penguins and sea lions and we got to see, obviously, in the water whales and killer whales, et cetera. So it just all in all, that's magical amazing experience. But if you go with a larger outfit, you don't get to disembark.
Okay, that's good to know because I've always wanted to go. I just never really looked into or knew how. I was just talking about that over Christmas with a friend of mine. It's like, we both want to go, but it's like, how do you even plan it? So maybe we'll have to. Well,
there's for good and for bad, there's now a number of cruise companies that do that. I would highly, highly recommend Nat Geo and Lindblad because they bring naturalists and they are so focused on making sure that there is a limited environmental impact.
Good.
And their most up-to-date ships are using renewable energy and no plastics. So I think that there's a lot that your listeners can explore. I mean, it is a kind of once in a lifetime. It's not like I can make a regular journey of going to Antarctica. I will
heading on my yearly Antarctica trip. See ya.
Yeah. Well, I'll just let you know this. Somebody once said to me, "Is this your first trip here? Or is this the first time going?" And I laughed because it made it seem like it was like going to like the Berkshires or something. But after I returned home, and then of course the pandemic hit, all I kept thinking was, I can't wait to go back. So I may do it again, but I don't see in the foreseeable future. And there's many other places on the planet I want to visit.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good question to ask next. Where's next for you in your travel? Where's next for you in your travels?
Well, LA in a couple of weeks, which doesn't sound very exciting. But I've been to Australia, but I've not been to New Zealand. So that is high on my list, as well as other parts of Australia. I do like to go far. Like if I'm going to go, I like to go far. So no offense to like Cleveland and Kansas City, but that's just the way I
am. I totally understand that. So what's your favorite meal that you've had while traveling? We'll stick to the travel theme.
I would say I fell in love with the food in Sri Lanka. It is divine, obviously very similar in some ways to Indian food, but Sri Lanka is the spice island. More spices evidently are grown there than anywhere else on the world.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The the people that cook, the chefs, the families, etc., they literally take advantage of all those spices. So it's like a cacophony of flavors in your mouth that I
Oh
don't
my
think it
gosh.
compares to anything. And there are some influences from the early colonization, which of course is not a good thing, but the influencers were like bringing, curry, and then they would put an egg on top of the curry. And so the combination of the kind of old world flavors and then the Sri Lankan flavors just come together just beautifully.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm getting hungry.
I am too. I didn't eat breakfast, so now I'm thinking about eggs and spices. And I love to cook, and I like learned to cook from my grandma, who is just always using spices. So it's like I've got literally a cabinet just full of spices.
Oh, amazing. Are they
everything you
still
can
fresh?
Imagine.
Is the question,
Yeah,
because I know a lot of people whose family, they have lots of cans, they have lots of spices, but the date would be like 1990.
I saw something. So I started a long time ago paying attention to that, and I use so much of them that usually I run out before the expiration. But I heard something on the news about that not that long ago, that someone was at their, or maybe it was a podcast, but someone was at their
Right.
parents' house, and they went through the spices and found stuff from the 90s.
Yeah,
And
no. It can happen. I mean, I probably have some that maybe I've only lived here since 2006, but it probably is a good time to go through my spice rack.
So, my last small talk question for you is, what did you want to be when you were growing up? And if that changed as you were a kid up to where you ended up in where you are as your first job an adult, that's cool to hear too.
Oh God, I've had 1,000 jobs, so I will bore your listeners. But as a child, I wanted to be an astronaut. I came of age. I was born in the 60s. So of course, when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, it was, I was very young. I was 5 when he did that. But
it's like larger than life when you're 5.
Yeah. Well, and the only mode of communications at the time was TV and radio, and but something like that was on the television, and just such an imprint. And I had an older brother who had a proclivity and love of science, so he was always talking about the stars and the moons, etc. But the real reason I wanted to be an astronaut is because I wanted to float. And I was a gymnast, and obviously when you're a gymnast, you go up, but you come down. And so I used to think, well, if I could be an astronaut, I'd get to stay in there, not have to worry about hitting my head. But once I learned I had to study physics, I kind of said, no, I can't do it. So that ended my very short career as a promising astronaut. And I was just asked like a couple of weeks ago, if I had the means, would I take one of the trips up with, Bezos or Branson?
I was going to ask you, so let's.
And if I had the means, I'd go in a heartbeat, even though it's so stupid. And I, should actually use that money for like good causes. But, I have a real kind of thirst for exploration in me. So that. But my first job out of college was working for the late Senator Edward Kennedy. And because I graduated with a degree in history in 85, and the job market was horrific. And what do you do with a degree in history anyways, but go to work on Capitol Hill?
I got talked out of it. So
yeah.
I love
and then I thought
history.
I was going to apply to join the CIA, but then, Reagan was the president, and I was one of the rare few whose family did not like Reagan. And I don't want to get political on your show, but
my show, we talk about politics. So if you want to,
okay.
Yeah, I've had political guests on before, so it's totally.
Well, my parents were, they grew up during the Depression. I mean, they were Democrats from their birth, and and clearly, if I worked for Senator Kennedy, I had that proclivity. But at the time, there was a lot of, we were doing some dastardly things in Central America, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be part of that. So that dream died too. But then I ended up getting going to graduate school for broadcast journalism and joining USA Today. So I was in the journalism world for the first 5-6 years of my career.
When I, when I was looking you up, I noticed that. So I was in journalism in high school and college too. And I got I wanted to be an investigative journalist by the time I was getting through college.
Aww.
And realizing like how corrupt it all is and how it's all bought and it's all about advertisers. And, you know, I was editor in chief of my college newspaper, and we had advertisers. Yeah, we had advertisers that were like,
oh my God, what year was this?
This was 2006. No, maybe 2006 or 7. Yeah.
That's
and
yesterday.
When you were living when you got your house.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm so old.
No. But that's very cool. So your journey is very fascinating. Can you talk and share a little bit about how you ended up in and out of journalism? Because I'm so fascinated to hear that.
Well, I am so grateful for the time that I did work in, because it taught me to be inquisitive. It taught me to lead with curiosity. It taught me how to research.
Yes.
You know, this is in the 80s, you know, there was microfiche, the Yellow Pages, and the Encyclopedia Britannica to look up people before you would reach out. And since I was so junior, my name used to be at the bottom of some of the longest stories of USA Today, because there was so much research that went into those stories. And to this day, I am a voracious, like before I reach out to somebody to ask for their business or to pitch them or to make a connection, I always take the time to learn about them first.
Right.
And like you just said, and that was seeded in me during my journalism days. And the reason I moved in, like I left the editorial side of the house, is because I like to write. I was on a path to be a reporter, but I didn't have that desire to write. I like to write just as a hobby. I didn't want to be writing every single day. So I moved into a marketing role at USA Today. So they transferred me from Washington, D.C. to Southern California. And then a couple of years later, I joined PR Newswire, and I was with PR Newswire for about 17 years in all sorts of different roles. Every 2 years, it was kind of like
moving around.
I would just be the person who got the proverbial SHIT done.
Yeah. You know, there's a big value in that. That's kind of how I've been in my career too. It's like, I like to build it. I like to get stuff done. And then I want to move on.
Exactly.
Keep the brain.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that's part of the curiosity you get when you learn journalism and you figure out like, oh, you know, you got to find out who somebody is or what they're saying, or is it matching what they're doing? And it doesn't 100%. Always line up. And it requires peak curiosity. And that's what I think part of the problem is too, is like, now everyone's so go that they just like read a headline and then it's moving on, and they don't have any context, and it's forming opinions that are sometimes a little bit terrifying on both sides. But
now we're living in the age of Substacks, like where every journalist has their own Substack, which, you know, there's some good to that. You can get there, but what happened to the editor, you know, the fact checkers and all that it makes me a little nervous sometimes.
You know, that's actually a good point. I didn't think of that. That's a good point. That is something that should probably be talked about a little bit more. I mean, I think it's good in some instances too, but I actually never thought about the editor. Interesting.
Well, I mean, these are more like columns, right? And, you know, columns, I mean, there's still an editor, but in terms of it's not going to be objective, right? And when you work and you're, and that's good. I mean, I'm happy, but if we're going to have thousands of people's opinions, where does that layer of objectivity that our democracy depends on? I mean, and
it's a good point.
I'm not an expert in it. I don't want to sound like I know more than I do, but given that I run a communications firm, we obviously have to pay attention to all of this.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with the types of clients you're working with. They're not going to want to put anything out in the market or anywhere that's not true or inaccurate. So it's smart. So I want to talk about your book a little bit, but more so, what was The Lost Art of Connecting? Obviously, this came out in 2021, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Which in the middle of all connections having been broken for about a year. What inspired you to talk about connection, or how did connection kind of become your thing? Because it's very important to me. And I think this is what, you know, Steph and I had talked about. I talk all the time about connecting with yourself, connecting with others. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you build these communications? How do you go to work? How do you go talk to your family? All of that kind of stuff. So I'm very inspired to hear how you got inspired in it, and tell a little bit about that story.
Well, several things. One, I always say to people, think about everything good that has happened in your life. What led to it? A meaningful connection. Two, I grew up in a house where both my parents were what you would call serial connectors, using the technology that we had at the time. The telephone, the automobile where you would drive and see people, of course, and the manual typewriter. And every morning at the breakfast table, my parents would have the 5 local newspapers, plus yesterday's or the day before's New York Times. I grew up in upstate New York, and the New York Times would come 1 or 2 days later because it would come in the mail. Mm-hmm. And they would clip and cut articles that made them think of people, relatives, colleagues, and then they would go to their respective manual typewriters, type short little missives, put them in envelopes, and send them off into the postal mail.
That is awesome.
But I thought everybody's parents did this. And day after day watching that, it just became part of me. And then in the 90s, when the internet happened, I could do what they were doing much more expeditiously. And I could put 15 people on one email with one article and say, you all need to read this. And by the way, you all need to connect. And then in the aughts, I could do that even to the 100th degree, using social media in a way to give shout outs, to connect people. And I was an early, user of Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter is obviously a very different place today, but
it's a dark place on Twitter.
Well, it wasn't about telling people what I was doing. It was more, how do I showcase others? How do I bring people together? How do I make those valuable connections? And then in 2007, I went away with 8 girlfriends for a weekend. And the weekend was all about how do we come up with our elevator speeches, which was becoming very important. You were just coming out of college at that time, but it was really important to be able to articulate what you do, who you are in that 30 seconds, mainly because, our attention spans were starting to shrink because of social media, but also you wanted to be able to, articulate something very, very clearly. And it was that weekend, in the safety of my 8 dear friends, that I was able to say, hi, I'm Susan McPherson. I'm a serial connector, communications expert, da-da-da-da-da. And of course, I wanted to pee in my pants because it sounded so ridiculous. But then...
I hear you. When I'm pitching myself, it's the same way.
Yeah. But then 16 years later, I've written a book about it. And then I founded my company at the age of 48, 10 years ago. And when I look back, and this is completely true, almost 90% of our business has been inbound. So what that told me was the connections I made in my 20s, in my 30s, good part of my 40s, actually have come back to help, to recommend, to buy, to sign up, you name it. So that was the impetus for writing the book. People see the title and they assume it was in reaction to the pandemic, but I actually got the book deal in 2019. And I started to write it when I got back from Antarctica in February of 2020. And I ended up writing it for 8 months during the pandemic.
You had nothing else to do, so it
well, I don't know about that, but,
right.
But that really, and then having the book to write during the pandemic, as you mentioned, gave me focus, and it helped me feel grounded. So that's how the book came to be.
So obviously, I think that's amazing. The connections that we make, I agree. I say the connections that we make with ourselves, and then we make them with others. If you're authentic, like, it always comes back. You always meet someone new, or you get brought into integrating with the types of people you should be or want to, or stimulate your brain and all of that stuff. So I think you're spot on with that. You have in the book the gather, ask, do model. Or whatever you want to call it. Can you explain what that is and how people can sort of apply that to their everyday lives?
Sure. And it's interesting, Nick, I heard you say, connecting with yourself. And so when I jump into the gather, there's an immediate correlation. Gather, ask, do is a methodology that can be used any time in your life. And I think now that we are coming out of the pandemic, I think in the last several months, there have been some fits and starts, and COVID still very much exists. So be careful and mask up when appropriate, or in crowded spaces. But the Gather, Ask, Do is a way to kind of crystallize what it means to build meaningful connections throughout your life. In the first section, Gather, is where you connect with the most important person, and that's yourself. And you do an audit to determine, what are your goals? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, heck, 6 months. And think about who is it that you want to connect with or reconnect with that are going to help you meet those goals.
Yeah.
You also, during Gather, really get a sense of what your superpowers are. And I realize that different parts of your life, you're going to have different superpowers. And oftentimes people just starting their career think, oh, I don't have any. But I guarantee you do.
You do. And you just got to tap into yourself.
Yes. And the reason it's so important to think about your superpowers is the underlying premise of the entire book is leading with how you can help and support others. Yep. If you don't know what your superpowers are, there's no way you know how you can be helpful. Yep. So that's the gather phase.
Yeah.
The ask phase is learning to ask the meaningful questions of others to find out what their hopes and dreams.
The reporter. There's the reporter again.
Exactly. And if you listen carefully, which we are all woefully bad at doing, myself included, you can go to my favorite part of the methodology, and that's the do. And that's when you take all of what you heard and listened and act and become dependable, become reliable, become trustworthy, because you do the things you say you're going to do. And that doesn't have to be writing a check for, $1 million. That doesn't have to be giving up your first child. It can mean introducing you to somebody. It can mean recommending a podcast. It can mean, helping somebody find a nonprofit that they would be wildly passionate about. So that's the gather, ask, do phase.
Yeah, I love that. That's the, one thing that I've been good the last 7 years with myself for the most part, where I've really honed in on like the kind of people I want to be around. I've really kind of connected with myself, and, I'm an introvert. And so as you know, and you've written about too, like being an introvert, you kind of have to protect your space a little bit, or
absolutely.
else, people will, and being empathetic, people will just, they won't even know they're doing it, but they can take advantage. And, so when you talk about like connection with yourself, like what are some of the ways you connect with yourself, or some of the values you've realized about yourself? And like, how did you learn them? Did you go through exercises, therapy? Did you just kind of always know?
Oh, I've gone through therapy for years, so that is one way. But I think one of the best ways to connect with yourself, if you're having stumbling blocks, is ask the people closest to you. What are my superpowers? When you look at me, what do you see? Because sometimes that will, I hate to use this word, but trigger ideas that perhaps you didn't think about. And discuss it with people you feel safe, because sometimes it's scary to be like telling people what you think you're good at or things that you know about. But I think if we get to a place where we're not embarrassed or shy, because these are things that we want to share with other people, that I think it would be advantageous. So I think it's a combination of my close friends, and age too. I mean, as you get older, you become just more comfortable with who you are, because this is all you got.
That's exactly right. And, an exercise I did, it's funny you say that. So I was laid off from, I was a VP of marketing. I was laid off in November of 2022.
Sorry.
And thank you. And, it's a traumatizing experience. And it was like literally just a financial move and a lot of, steps that caused it in the company, which, whatever. But, I kind of went through this phase of what do I want to do? Like now is my chance to use my platform to figure out what I want to do. And so what I started doing was asking, to your point, my friends and family, and being like, what do you think of this? Do you think this not necessarily is my superpower, but do you think I'm good at this? And then I went to, because I have a good sized Instagram following, and I went to some of the people that are most loyally commenting, most loyally interacting with the things on there that are about me, which is like, I do a lot of DIY stuff. I talk a lot about self-care and wellness. And I talk a lot about, just movement and how to like do the basic things like get outside and walk in the morning, stuff like that. And so I talked to them to find out, like, what do you think? Why are you here? What do you think is the most value that I'm bringing to you, to help me kind of hone in on what I'm going to do? So it is very useful. And, I've been doing some personal coaching around connecting with yourself and with others. And so that kind of thing it's very powerful to get the reinforcement at the very least of the people that know you best to give you that power. So I think that's a good takeaway for everyone here to do, is go find someone you trust and ask them what they think your superpowers.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
one of my conversation starters I give people is, why don't you go ask someone what their superpower is and just have the conversation starter
I
instead
love
of,
that, Nick.
yeah, instead of just saying, hey, how's it going? Or how's your day? Or, the standard greetings, ask someone something to get their brain going and get a good conversation. Builds connection. So let's talk a little bit about more with your business. So you work with some pretty good businesses, and what does that look like? What are your goals when you walk into a company to help them get better at communication?
Well, and just to clarify, we specifically focus on impact communication. So companies may have PR firms and communications firms, but what we do is we help them communicate the impact that they are having with the audiences that would be interested in that. So that could mean their investors, that could mean their employees, that can mean, of course, the general public. But we focus specifically on their environmental, their social, and their governance, ESG. So it could be their philanthropic communications. It could be how they're, reducing all their packaging and limiting their carbon footprint, and how that is having an impact. And our clients range from major companies like Ford Motor and Zoetis, which is in the pet pharma and global livestock world, to nonprofits such as the Leadership Now Project, which is all about helping business leaders advocate and defend our democracy, to abortion rights and Games for Change, which is all about making the gaming industry better globally. And
Wait,
all in all,
what about the gaming industry? That's a new one. I haven't heard.
Well, Games for Change has been around for 12 years, and we know that there have been over the year problems with the video, with addiction and all of that.
Gaming,
how can gaming be a stronger way to share good in the world? Because it's a great learning tool. It's a great now with virtual reality, we can be. It doesn't all have to be shoot 'em up and bang bang and violence.
Well, that was so. I actually worked for Sony PlayStation. Was my second job, and I'm not a gamer, and that was such a weird job for me. And that doesn't mean I don't play. Like, I have a PlayStation. I will play occasionally. I'll play like a sports game, which gamers hate when you play sports game. But it was so like eye-opening to me when I think back to that, how many people just lived for like Call of Duty or lived for there was this game that came out when I worked there called MAG, which was Massive Action Game, and it was just like the biggest online platform to date at the time of war, where they're just running around, you're just shooting everybody. And it can get like super violent, and then the stimulation, it's a weird dopamine hit that I think it's interesting.
When were you at Sony?
2008 to 2010.
Okay.
Right.
What an interesting time to be there. Yeah.
Oh, I got my first time I was laid off in my career was from my first job at Motorola right around the recession. So it was wiped out. Yeah.
Well, we're seeing it again now. I have a feeling with the companies who are laying off people, they're going to be hiring in other parts of the company. I think it's just they staffed up a lot during the pandemic, and now with Microsoft, for instance, they let 10,000 people go, but now they're staffing up on their AI work. Yeah. So half a dozen to one, I guess, but that doesn't help the people who get laid off.
No, it doesn't. And the thing that's interesting, I actually wrote about this on LinkedIn yesterday, was how a company can like treat their employees better on the way out, because that's great. Yeah, because
you wrote that. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can send it to you too. But it's just basic things like, hey, give someone an opportunity to work with a career counselor or career coach. Send them out with like severance that is going to actually allow them to find a new job. Like, I know I did not get that. So people get it hurts their mental health. It hurts when you're sitting there and you're like, am I going to be able to afford my house? When you're sitting there like, how long am I going to, or like, I don't have health insurance right now, like stuff like that. And these companies, they want to preach integrity. They want to preach all these values, but then they just cut you and they send you out there to die. And it's
awful.
It's awful. So I wrote, I got inspired yesterday. I wasn't even planning on it. I wrote this piece about that. And I think it's important that companies do start to treat people better on the way out. Because, by the way, like, people remember this, and people recommend or don't recommend working somewhere. So when you want to staff back up again, people are scarred. So it's going to be hard to build trust, I think. And that's going to be
1,000%.
That's going to be an interesting one. What do you think is the most important thing that you've learned about connecting with other people that you can share as maybe like a starting point? Because I personally, in my DMs on Instagram, and I have 330,000 followers, people struggle with like the basics right now because of being locked up for so long. So it's everyone, and it's funny, people asking me for dating advice, but like it's like people don't know how to connect in real life anymore. And I think that's what's so important about like the work that you do is you may not do it, or you may do it digitally in some cases, but you're actually building like real life connections too.
Well, interestingly enough, I have been to 3 weddings from people I met on Twitter in 2007, 2008, 2009. So I definitely, prior to pandemic, post-pandemic, it does certainly help to reach out in real life when it's possible. But I do also think that, instead of trying to always go back to what we have, how do we use these new platforms to actually create a world we want? How do we help when we do get together with people, make it filled with joy, even in, their professional settings. But, to answer your question about some of the surprises, number one, if we build and make meaningful connections a huge part of our lives, we'll be healthier, even healthier than running every day and eating kale every day. Although I do like kale. I live in
I do too.
2, the number one way I have found that to make meaningful connections is to not make it about you and to learn about the others. And the beautiful thing, unlike in 85, 86, 87, when I was at USA Today and I had, very limited means, today, before you reach out to someone, you can find out if they have grandchildren by looking at their Instagram. You can find out what they are upset about today, in the political world on Twitter. You can see their entire career trajectory. Now, obviously, there will always be that one person who's stealth, but for the most part, you can learn so that when you do reach out, make it about them.
Yeah.
And then find some way to be helpful. And I realize sometimes you're like, oh, what am I going to do? But I guarantee if you spend a little bit of time, 10 minutes, researching somebody before you reach out, you will find something you can do to offer up. So it isn't, hi, can I pick your brain?
Yeah.
And then rinse and repeat. Stay in touch, even if it means just sending a clip or giving a quick shout out on social media, and showcasing somebody or tagging them in something that you feel really happy about and you want to share. So those are the things that over time give people the dopamine that we all get when somebody reaches out to you and just says, hey, Nick, I'm thinking of you. How are you? Or not even putting the how are you. So there's no onerous on you to have to respond, but more, you popped in my brain and I wanted to say hello. Yeah.
That is so smart. And, now that you mentioned that, I think back to like, I don't get it as much, but like as everything for me was kind of getting a little uneasy, I would get so many DMs of people that were saying, oh, I saw this and thought of you. And it's, something from a movie I've mentioned I like, or something from a hobby that I have. And it's a nice little touch. And I think showing gratitude.
Yes.
I don't have the book because I was looking at it yesterday, but showing gratitude to people is one of the greatest things that you can do. And I've been gratitude journaling now for a couple months.
Great.
It's so great. And just like you said, tag someone in a meme, send over something inspirational and those little things. And I have made like real friends through social media that I am getting dinner with on Sunday, or I had a friend that I made a whole post about who reached out to me. Actually, I'll tell this story real quick. Who I wrote about it. So this girl reached out to me, and her name is Christy, and she asked me if I could talk to her back in October because she was working to being cast on a reality show. And having gone through that, she said, I think I relate to you the most. Would you answer some of my questions? So we DM'd a little, voice memoed, ended up talking on the phone. The first time we talked or one of the first times we talked on the phone, we talked for 8 hours.
Oh my God.
I know.
Oh my God.
I know. And, luckily for me, I was unemployed, so I didn't have to get up and go to work the next day like she did. But we built this friendship just over social media.
That.
Yeah. And then she came to visit a couple of weeks ago. So she came up from North Carolina to Chicago. She visited. We had a fun weekend. I showed her around. She'd never been here. And we have like a friendship now that is blooming, and it's amazing. And it's all just because we chatted.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yeah. Seriously. Thank you for giving the platform, in a sense, of talking about connecting. So I've got one more thing I wanted to ask you.
Okay, great.
About connection. What's some advice that you could share, or some learnings you could share to people who want to like connect in not just like in a mentorship or in some sort of work way for their organization? Because that's another thing I think people are struggling with. They go, and I've seen it, you go in person to work now, or you do an event with people, and it's awkward.
Yep.
It can be very uncomfortable. So what are your thoughts on that, or any advice you have in that situation, especially for younger professionals who maybe came out and they were on Zoom the whole time, and now they're being asked to go sit in a room with people?
The people who hold the power need to make it easier. In other words, they need to build an environment where people feel welcome and valued. And even if it means prompts, even if it means reaching out ahead of an event or a gathering and saying, what can I do in my role to help you feel like you belong? And think of ways and people that makes most sense to connect them to. I mean, for those who are introverted or shy, in my book, I have, I think, 1 or 2 chapters dedicated to it. And I suggest go with the power of 3, meaning when you go to the office or you go to an event, think of meeting 3 people, sharing 3 things about yourself, and learning 3 things. And then you can go hide in the bathroom or, hide under your desk or what have you. And it could be 2, it could be 4, but make a goal of that once a week. And then follow up. And remember, when you meet these people, it isn't just like about you, it's learning about them. And, one of the reasons I have had a successful career before I started my company was the fact that I would reach out to people who didn't work in my department to learn about their role so that I could be helpful to them. And in essence, because I learned about their role, I became better representative of the company. Yes. So to me, if you're new at a company or just starting out, it behooves you to learn as much as you can about the entire organization and not just your role. And connecting with people, whether it means just 5-minute phone call to learn more about their role, could be invaluable as you progress through your career. So that would be my suggestion. I would offer one other thing. Get rid of your preconceived notions. We tend to make judgments saying, oh, that person can't help me because that person works in the food industry and I am in the tech industry, or that person can't help me because he's from another country. Again, I'm being silly, but the point is every single person is worthy of our curiosity, our compassion, and our kindness. And some of the people that I have met in my life have absolutely nothing to do with impact or communications or puppies or what have you. But I have learned so much from them, and I've learned more about myself because I allowed myself to be open to meeting people who are not like me, don't look like me, don't sound like me. And we would all be in a better place, a better planet, if we were more open to that. So get rid of preconceived notions.
That's genius. And I actually, it's funny. I believe that is the hardest thing to even understand you have to do, but something that I learned to do in my probably late 20s. And it has opened up my mind in so many ways. And it's like, it helped me realize like one of my, main values is do the right thing.
Mm.
And what that means to me anyway, like having integrity, is treat everybody as if they are a human being. So, when a homeless person asks for something, I acknowledge them. When the cashier at the store wants to chat, I acknowledge them, even if I don't want to chat, which I don't. I'm an introvert. I put my headphones in, I put noise canceling on, and I'm about my business. So, but I think that those are really, really good. Another thing that you just mentioned, when you talk about opening yourself up to other people and other walks of life, which is my whole mission statement with this podcast, is to have meaningful conversations, people across all walks of life, because you don't know, because of preconceived notions.
You don't know. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think that goes especially with politics, because I talk about politics a lot. And I talk about it with my friends, and I force it on them, and I force the issues on them, which is what I love about what your parents did, was sending like little news articles and stuff, because I do that in a group chat with my friends, and 8 out of 10 times nobody responds, but it's like, at least I'm doing my part.
Well, you're getting people to listen and at least kind of get out of navel gazing.
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned, like, through communication, obviously, but like I can talk to anyone politically. I can talk on any level of the spectrum. Now, people have preconceived notions against me, but the funny thing is, like, I can talk to people across the political spectrum because I'm listening, I'm asking questions, and I'm covering the why. And the why someone is the way they are, why someone thinks the way they think, why someone feels the way they feel, is the superpower to really connect with them. Like, you can find out that you have a lot in common if you find out the why. And even if it's to agree to disagree on something.
Yeah. Like that. No, I mean, there's an organization called Starts With Us that was founded by the fellow that founded Kind Bars. And I encourage you to check it out. But it's all about, how do we get people talking to one another who have diverse opinions.
What was that called again? I'm going to have to write that down.
Starts With Us. And it comes from Daniel Lubinsky, the founder of Kind Bar. This whole notion is, if we continue down this path of not talking to one another, it's going to be cataclysmic, right? And I get it. It's hard. But I think for the most part, we have much more in common than we have.
Yes. I say that all the time.
I understand there are some people who have been so viscerally harmed that we can't expect them to even move through this kind of movement that Starts With Us is doing. But I think it's worth checking out.
I definitely will.
I've been very, very impressed with the messaging and some of the interviews they're doing to bring people together that come from different walks of life, just to see, how they differ, but actually how they are similar in so many ways.
I think that's so important. And I agree with you. Like, we are on a path right now where everybody is just digging their feet in their spot, and it's just, the divide's getting more permanent, maybe bigger, but I say more permanent. And that's again, one of the reasons I wanted to start this show, is because I feel like we all need to listen more to one another. And if we do that, you can actually start to find out, to your point, especially in America, like, I think we have people that are just disenfranchised from either side, and that's causing divides that maybe those people actually have a lot more in common. And so, like, I take the example of, like, someone being laid off, right? So, we've got the AI chat GPT right now, right?
Yeah.
That is the beginning of us not needing content writers anymore.
Crazy.
Right?
Crazy,
Isn't that
crazy? Well,
I've been writing. Yeah, I'm in marketing. I've been writing, and I love to write. And I've been writing my whole life, through journalism, through creatively, all of that. And now it's just like, is it, and of course it doesn't have your voice yet, like your tone, your comedy. Like, I write and speak a little sarcastically and with a lot of satire. So, like, it would need that still. But now the writer the content writer that's going to lose their job because it's been outsourced to AI has something in common with the factory worker that lost their job. And now you've both lost your job to outsourcing, yes, to different things, but why don't we talk about that and how that has impacts on our mental health? And, so people can come together in ways that we don't think about. And if you peel the onion back, everybody wants the same thing. They all want to
1,000%.
Be healthy. They want to take care of themselves. They want to take care of their family. They want to have a place to live. They want to eat, and they want to do leisure activities and maybe sometimes take a vacation. People don't want much more than that.
Exactly. You mentioned you have this massive following on Instagram, and shame on me. I am not following you, and I need to be. And tell me what you talk about on Instagram that is so wildly popular.
Yeah. So, I was on a reality show, Love is Blind. I was not on social media before that. And I was, but it was pictures of my dog 2 times a year.
I love that.
And he has his own Instagram now. So now I'm really online. So we'll connect there for sure. But I like to talk about self-care tips. I'm a mental health advocate, which is something that's been a challenge for me because I used to not talk about my mental health. I used to not even tell people I was in therapy or, what I was working on until a few years ago. And now I get to share that with more people. So I like to share a little bit of my journey, and it's not always great. Sometimes I had a hard day today, but here's how I pushed myself through it. And then I like to talk about DIY stuff. I make a lot of my own products. I make my own soaps. I make some of my own condiments. Yeah. So I share those recipes on the show. One of the lines that got in there was that I make my own toothpaste. So people, immediately wanted that recipe. And so I just make a lot of my own stuff. I like to share all that. And then I share
follow you.
I share quirky stuff because I'm nuanced, because we're all nuanced. And I'm not a brand, I'm a person. And so when you come to see me, you're going to see, I just went to San Antonio last week and I went to WWE. Why? Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a WWE wrestler. And
oh my God.
When I was 5, that was my dream. And so every now and then I like to go to the live events because it reminds me of my childhood. And my friends, some of them still, watch it. My family does. And so that was fun. So I shared all of that. Yeah, that's probably a little bit different than you thought. Maybe
I can't wait to follow you. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And where do you live now?
I'm in Chicago still. I've been in Chicago or the suburbs for Chicago.
Yes. I love it though. I love it.
You've been to Chicago, I bet.
Oh my God. I did a 6-month stint years ago in Naperville.
Naper Thrill.
Which I love too. Yeah. Actually, it was so nice because you could take the subway or the whatever it's called, the L train, right into the city, which to me was awesome.
Oh, it's great. And Naperville's great. It's really great.
Thank you. This was an absolute delight. And I'm so thrilled that now we are in one another's orbit. Please let me know how I can be helpful to you. You're doing phenomenal things, and bringing out people's stories is such a gift. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And we'll get connected on Instagram now too. And I'll, we'll be in touch there too. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Conversations with Nick Thompson. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to follow us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Links can be found in the description below, and we can't wait to see you next time.